When Jim Clark first arrived at Indianapolis, the Americans smiled. The rear-engined Lotus Ford looked very neat, very British, but surely it wasn't big enough to do the job. Big enough and fast enough, it proved. In 1965, Jim Clark became the first winner at Indy to average over 150 miles an hour. The following year, respect for Graham Hill, another Formula One world champion, completed back-to-back victories for Britain. But for over a quarter of a century since, it's really been America's race. The late Colin Chapman brought Nigel Mansell into Formula One with Lotus in 1980. 13 years on, he'd have been proud to see his protege as world champion tackling the Indy 500 for the first time. The odds against success were high, but who'd bet against this competitor? Indianapolis is a driver's sternest test. 500 miles, 200 laps of the four-turn oval, physically grueling, mentally exhausting. But then, what's changed? In 1911, the first 500-miler was run round Indianapolis, double the previous longest race round the circuit. Only possible because 3 million bricks were laid to create a paved surface. Crashes were just part of the game. Ray Haroon in a Marmon Wasp averaged over 74 miles an hour to win in 1911. In 1913, Peugeot became the first foreign make to win. By the late 30s, the average speed was up to 113 miles an hour. Walls now divided spectators from the cars. Immediately pre-war, the bright sparks at Indy borrowed Hollywood technology. Reminiscent of Laurel and Hardy perhaps, but this was serious business. Looking back, a major innovation. Following Pearl Harbor, the speedway closed in 1942. By then, 29 Indy 500s had been staged. The circuit, though, fell into disrepair. 1946, a lick of paint, new grandstands, most of the bricks replaced by tarmac, and the crowds returned, jamming the roads of Indiana. This was a period of real change, a bright new era. Indianapolis became a tradition again, retaining its usual end-of-May date in the racing calendar. The 1946 race kicked off the new season. Preparation time minimal, George Robson winning at just below 115 miles an hour. Top speeds in 1952 were up to 139 miles an hour as the Frank Curtis designed roadsters built specifically for the Indy circuit proved ideally suited. Other novelties, the first turbo and the first diesel. George Sally's successful development of the Belond exhaust special was the major introduction in 1957. Sally determined that a low centre of gravity for the car would improve speed and handling. The engine was slung sideways. Sam Hanks drove to victory. The foreign challenge, dormant post-war, resumed in 1961. Jack Brabham, reigning Formula One world champion, appeared in a Cooper, paving the way for Clark and Hill. America, though, remembers 61 as the year a 26-year-old from Texas won for the first time. A.J. Foyt, on the way to a second successive national championship. 1962, Parnelli Jones in the headlines after qualifying at over 150 miles an hour. But the pace of change was such that only 3 years later, Jim Clark won at an average of over 150 in the Lotus Ford. Dan Gurney was the instigator of the partnership that produced the sleek rear-engine development. 1969, Mario Andretti, a popular winner. He lifted the record average speed to over 156 miles an hour. Male domination ended in 1977 when Janet Guthrie qualified for the race. Her car lasted 27 laps. That same year, Clay Regazzoni from Switzerland ran into big trouble. Somehow, he emerged unhurt. Tom Snaber snatched pole position in 1978 for the second year in succession, this time averaging 200 miles an hour. By 1982, ground effect cars were the fashion. Rick Mears started from pole. 500 miles later, he was pipped for first place by Gordon Johncock, the margin 1600ths of a second. The Kentucky Kid, Danny Sullivan, in his first season with Penske, won in 1985, the team's 5th win overall since it first appeared in 1969. Kevin Cogan's massive accident 4 years later was transmitted round the world, an example of the hazards of Indianapolis. Nelson Piquet crashed last year, one of a whole catalogue of accidents that littered practice, qualifying and the race, prompting changes to car design and to the track itself to make the Indy experience that much safer. 1992 saw the closest finish of all time, Alan Unser Jr. holding off Scott Goodyear to win by 400ths of a second. Unser's first win after 10 years of trying. The Borg Warner Trophy's the prize, but coupled with the title goes the glory and the prestige of victory in the world's greatest motor race.